Hello, all, and welcome back to Mind Juice. To the Lancashire Constabulary, I realize I have been rather harsh in openly expressing my personal opinion, as well as highlighting further criticism as to how many in the public perceive the handling of this case up until this point. I want to make it clear I have always been 100% pro law enforcement. Now, here in the US, I sincerely admire the FBI, even though they do have their instances of fault as well. I have always been anything and everything authentic, true investigation. For the victims and families, said service is designed to help protect and provide support to. Now, the Lancashire Constabulary may still be amidst investigating the criminalities associated with this case, and for Nicola and her family, we all hope this is the case, sincerely. I do feel my assertions, raising of said anomalies on your behalf to this point, are valid to a certain extent. I think we can all agree you also acknowledge things could have been done better. So I myself acknowledge the same. This is not an apology, better yet, is an acknowledgement that I and the channel as well can do better. Expressing frustration or criticism, that is. Why do you say this, Mind Juice? You don't need to do this. Remember, Nicola is the only focus here. The reason I raise this, I don't want this criticism to close the attention off of or from those still involved in the case. That is, the ones with the ability to make a difference, if said integrity does still remain with the investigation of this case. I do not want the potential value of the evidence or theory herein to be dismissed merely due to a distasteful interpretation of my presentation towards the authorities. Again, I trust all law enforcement, anyone at that, until there is a legitimate reason to feel otherwise. Like I said, although there has been some sketchy handlings and misdirection thus far, multiple at that, I respect that the truth still demands appropriate and professional attention. Time will be the ultimate judge of the aforementioned discussion and criticism. If you so choose to continue on with the people are stupid, we're all omniscient and controlling narrative, then that's on you. Good luck with that. My interest, this channel's interest, is 100% in the vein of Nicola Bulley's truth and justice. I hope that is understood, and I have faith that somebody with influence, still remains here. There. This is who I speak to. With that said, for those of you faithful whom have already watched my previous content and the latest episode, Last Piece, Tidal Truth, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I poured a lot of energy and time into that. Now, I have received a lot of feedback to make a focus piece on the Marsh Farm Hall, the title science, how and when she was found, like I hit on last episode. That way, the evidence and facts don't get missed. For I didn't get into said aspect until a half an hour approximately in my last piece. And I realized that not everybody made it that far. So this here is going to be a brief rehash of that exact aspect of the case. That way, if any of the authorities or anyone new comes across it, it gets right into the point, and most importantly, is not lost. We all remember the 15th presser, the Becky Smith and Pete Lawson press conference, wherein Nicola's vulnerabilities were first released publicly to the world. The one wherein marked the shift of the official investigation away from the River Wyre. Approximately 4 days thereafter, Nicola was found, less than a mile downstream from the bench. Also, less than a mile upstream from Marsh Farm Hall. Yet, Nicola was first witnessed by Jason, the psychic, retreating back towards the bench in the Weir area due to her flowing with the high tide at that time, which means then, wherever she came from, given the fluctuation of high and low tide, can actually be in a roundabout way calculated considerably. Everyone, there is one legit property that resides amidst this back and forth movement and or pendulum Nicola would have been moving within, which I will show you. Nicola was not in that water for 23 days, mind you. She would have been found. Or some like to believe she was lodged up into something, for that is what the police suggest in the narratives She was up in the reeds. She was up in the reeds. Even newscasts drilling Faulding, suggesting that he may have missed her, as if she was there the whole time. No, 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 no. Jason saw her floating down the middle of the water, by his own admission. So this then suggests she was doing such the whole time. That's not possible. She would have been found. I will show you right here how and why she was not up in the reeds. I see some people saying there was a storm surge on the 18th or 17th that would have risen the waters. Here are the water levels here that I have gotten from. There's a measurement just below the weir that is taken every single day with the flow and everything, okay? And I have documented every single day of which Nicola was missing, okay? Everything remains pretty much static throughout the first 17 days, all right? Then we get to the 18th, the day before she was found. The water level rises about 0.25. It goes up to 0.75 meters, and then back down on the 19th, the day she was found, to 0.51. Okay, so for my American brain, that's 1.64 feet up to 2.5 feet. Okay, now here's the deal. The whole scapegoat thing with Peter Faulding. She couldn't have possibly been stuck in the reeds, and I'm going to show you. Here's the water levels, okay? Had she been stuck up in the reeds, it would have had to have happened on the 18th. How do I say that and what do I mean? If you look at all the days prior to the first 17 days, it remains static. In order for her to get stuck up on the reeds, let's use this area right here as an example, okay? If you look at the water measurements, the 17th, it's what, 0.50? Okay, then 18th, that's when people are saying the storm surge is, we go up to 0.75, okay? The water is going to raise up a little bit. Let's say right here, right? Let's just put something right there, okay? Does it matter what it's called? Okay, let's say it goes up to right there, right? If she's floating along the side here, when it goes up to 0.75, okay, then when it recedes back down on the 19th to 0.51, to where it is on the day she's found, okay, this isn't the exact measurement. This Google Earth shot is from like 2021. But you get the idea. It goes up from 0.50 to 0.75, then back down to 0.51. For her to be in the reeds, she would have had to have been up on a higher water level, which is 0.75 on the 18th, to match that logic, okay? For her to be stuck, she would have had to have stayed there when the water level receded on the 19th back down to 0.51. But we know that didn't happen because Jason Rothwell claims that he first observed her coming down the middle of the river about 1/4 mile away right here. So she wasn't stuck up on the reeds. The only day that would have been possible is the 18th, and I just explained that, okay? Any day prior to that, the water level doesn't fluctuate enough for her to get stuck, and then it later recedes to where she would have been stuck there. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The whole idea of her being stuck up in the reeds is the smear campaign pointing the finger at Faulding. It didn't happen. Like I said, she'd only been in the water for 1 or 2 days. I think 1 day, maybe 12 to 16 hours. That's why she didn't get caught on this. I bet this is the first time that she passed this brush and she got stuck. Because as you come around this bend, the water and flow is going to push something this way, and that's why she got stuck. So she couldn't have been lodged up anywhere, nor was she floating up and down along the river for 23 days. There is a reason why Jason saw her coming down the middle of the water, and I'll show you. Which means she was placed into the water recently, most likely, in my opinion, within 24 to 48 hours, prior to her being found. Not at the lay-by or the over the wall, as we all first presumed was she put in, but over the back fields and the private land, near the culvert and the creek exiting Marsh Farm Hall, most likely in the midst of the night at the beginning of low tide to give her the best opportunity to float out to sea. The home of Emma White. The place wherein resides the red van, the place wherein Emma's sister, or maybe it's not her sister. Either way, said lady did jump Curtis Media for filming this approach and area. I wonder why. The only property within the path and pendulum wherein one would float. Check this science out and then decide for yourself.
A tidal river. So the tide comes in, the tide goes out. We worked on a job a few years ago where a sheep was being carried down on the current, on the ebbing tide, and on the flooding tide, it would come back to the same place every night, a dead sheep. It didn't move. It didn't go far. If you went missing near an estuary, you could go out to sea. But things tend to move up and down with the tides. It's an awful long stretch of river with a lot of shallows. She would have been found by now in the shallows. Obviously, the water will rise and it will go out. Every 6 hours there's a turn of the tide and things can move out very quickly. We worked on one operation in Kent where a sheep was going up and down the river for 2 weeks, a bloated dead sheep, and it came back to the same point every night. It can go out and it can come back in again. What I do find strange is that she hasn't gone very far. If she I would have expected her to go further in 3 weeks than she did, literally a few hundred yards just down the stream from the weir.
Is it feasible that the body could have drifted 15 kilometres to Morecambe Bay?
No, not with this not on this tidal river. In my experience, I mean, things tend to get washed in and washed out. But there's so many bends and snag hazards. It's very shallow down there as well. As the tide goes out, it hits the stones. We had a boat grounded the other day. There's nowhere to go.
So here we're going to discuss Jason's comment because I think he makes two huge comments that make a huge difference. So in the past, in my River Wyre inconsistencies, I discussed how it wasn't possible she went in below the bench. Given decomposition, all of that, she wouldn't have made it over the weir. Okay? I've already discussed that. That's what all this is from. Okay? Then here we get to where Nicola was found on February 19th. Okay? And we know from official reports the police were called at 11:35. All right? And the whole narrative was she was found up in the rush and in the reeds. And this is where Peter Faulding got trashed for, are you sure you searched that area? You didn't see her, I didn't see her. And there's a lot of people saying, he failed, he didn't do his job. Well, that's crap, okay? Because that's not how she was originally found, as we learned from Jason, okay? I want to share a couple messages that he says here. He says, her journey home ended in that tree, but prior to that, she was floating down the middle of the river. Okay? Then, he says, without discussing too much, she was only in the tree a very, very short time prior to that is, in the police report. Then he says, you wait for the inquest. You will regrettably find she was not under the tree until minutes before the police were called. Okay? And then another one, he says, yeah, all psychic stuff aside, I can just clarify that lay-by is not actually part of the situation. If you were to wait for the inquest, the actual initial location of her body is another 0.25, a quarter of a mile away from the place mentioned. Okay? There's two huge aspects here once I really thought about it, okay? Well, aside from the two aspects, number one, Peter Faulding shouldn't be getting all the shame that he's getting because she wasn't up in the reeds when she was found, okay? That's all the smear campaigning going on again. Jason Roswell, the psychic who found her, claims that when he first saw her, I've seen reports of 0.21, 0.25, he saw her coming down the river, okay? So, to give you a visual, this is my estimation. They're on a walk, okay, coming up this bend, and this will help you visualize it. He's claiming about a quarter down the way. So as you saw in the measurements here, he's seeing her come down, and he says in the middle of the river. And he even jokes in one comment that they couldn't cordon off the middle of the river, emphasizing the fact that he saw her in the middle of the river, which is right here, okay? So my guess is they're walking around here, right? They see something, okay, which eventually ends up being Nicola coming down the middle of the rear. And then he says she only found she came home into the tree just minutes before police arrived. So the narrative is she was in the reeds, leading everybody to believe that she was there the whole time, right? As in still trying to play their illogical, nonsensical narrative that she still went in below the bench. Somehow went over the weir and nobody saw her, okay? But that's not the truth, and Jason just revealed that, okay? So this is still out of the water. She was coming this way due to high tide, right? And he claims that she only rested there at 11:35 when the cops were called, okay? Why is this huge? This is huge because he saw her coming down the middle of the river, and it was high tide, all right? And I'm going to show you, I have Fleetwood tidal measurements that are coming from right here, okay? And the way tides work is, not to get too scientific, but the moon has a gravitational pull on the earth, and twice a day, approximately every 6 hours or so, the gravitational pull causes waves to come, right? So when high tide comes in, it's a big wave that comes in and hits, and then that rush of water pushes in, right? That's high tide. And that lasts for about 6 hours. The ripple effect, right? That's high tide for 6 hours. So it takes a while for that inertia and that water push to make it down this way, but you get the idea. And then after 6 hours, it shifts to low tide, which eventually then things start to flow backwards, okay? That's and I'll show you the measurements are coming from here because this is where the waves are coming from the ocean, all right? Now, why is that significant here? It's extremely significant. If you remember, Peter Faulding suggests the idea of a bloated dead sheep. I think it's funny how he says that. Maybe that's my American, just the way he says it. But he said they had a bloated dead sheep that for 2 weeks straight, the dead sheep would, on high tide, go up, and then on low tide come back, returning to the same point every single evening for 2 weeks straight. Okay? And like he said, he does not believe Nicola could make it out to the estuary because there's too many whips and turns and debris and whatnot, and I completely agree, right? First, he says she would have been found because there's too many shallows. I agree. She would have been found. She wasn't in the river those first 21 days. She just wasn't. I've already proved that River Wyre consistency. I have Emma with the ring, and now I'm going to show you Marsh Hall is right there in the middle of the pendulum that Nicola was likely swinging upon for either a day or two, right? Using science. So why is 11:35 so important? If we look at the Fleetwood tidal rating for that day, February 19th, you can look at the measurement here. And I know a lot of you understand this. I'm going to explain it here. On the left side, as you go up the hill, that's high tide, okay? So that's coming in, that's all high tide, right? And I'll demonstrate it with arrows there. And then as you hit the top there and cusp and start to come down like a roller coaster, that's low tide, where it starts to suck back out, okay? Nicola was found at 11:35 a.m., okay? And if you look at the high tide, low tide ratings for that day, it only lets me pick between 11:21 and 11:41. So I did 11:41 because that's closest. Why is it so significant? Because it was at the tail end of the high tide. Okay, so has she not hit this debris here? Yes, it probably would have pushed her a little bit further, right? But not much more, because as you see, as you go over that as 11:41, it's already starting low tide, okay? Then she's going to start to suck back out for another 6 hours, okay? So this is significant because he sees her coming down the middle of the river, and the cops get there at 11:35, and he says just minutes before. He sees her just minutes before. She's coming down the middle, just minutes before she made her way home in the trees, okay? If you look at the graph, this is huge because it shows the end of high tide. And why is that big? Because it gives you a marker understanding the science and the tidal measurements. She would have been on a pendulum, like Faulding says, that dead bloated sheep going back and forth the same point every single night, okay? She's not going to float all the way down here because the tides fluctuate back and forth, same point, same point. This 11:35, given the science of it, bookends her end of pendulum at the end of high tide. She may be a little bit further, but she hit the brush. This is why I don't think she had been floating back and forth for so long a time, because That would be insinuating that she went past it, got lucky, came back, past it, got lucky, went past it, back, got lucky. You get what I'm saying? She got snagged up on it and stuck. I bet this is the first or maybe even the second time she went past it. To not hit that, she got lucky, right? But it's huge because the science shows this is the bookend of the high tide, which is big because, yeah, like I said, she could have went a little bit further, but she would not have made it back. She can't because of like the dead sheep. It goes back and forth, back and forth. So with that said, now can I estimate exactly where she goes back to? No, that's not possible. And another thing I want to show right here. If you look at through, I think I have the 9th, all the way up to the 19th and past, the wave strengths don't change, and this is all based upon the moon, okay? They don't change. So you can't say, well, it would have changed a week ago. You don't know if it would have been further. Yeah, I do, because the science says it. This isn't my opinion. This is studying and understanding the science. If you look at the waves here I have to you since the 9th when Faulding was there and he would have found her, they don't fluctuate too much. That guarantees in cement she would have been in a pendulum, just like the dead sheep, for 2 weeks, back and forth, back and forth. She wasn't in there for 2 weeks because she would have been seen or been caught up in something, right? She would have. It wasn't until after they shifted focus away for 4 days. Now, which day was she put in there? I don't know for sure. But the fact she's coming down the middle of the river, he sees her, and the timing of 11:45 in the science shows its end of high tide, okay? So then you know at that point she's going to, if you look at the graph, you see she will start to make her way back, okay, this way, right? But here too, she's probably making, like here, you can see she goes pretty quick. Well, it's a straight shot. She's going to move pretty quick, right? But as she goes up this way, right, it's not like Mario Kart. I don't know if that's a good reference for the UK. She's not going to come up here and whip around these bends like a race car. Like she's not going to. She's going to most likely, ping pong. Not to be disrespectful, but seriously. And then if she kind of gets stuck for a little bit, it's going to take a little bit of the water until it kind of pushes her, and then she'll start to move along again. Maybe get snagged here, here, here. You can get the point, okay? It's going to take her a considerable amount of time to get around all these cranks and these turns, right? As she hits here, it's a straight shot, and she's going to start to flow middle of the river, which is what he saw, okay? So the question is knowing that that's the bookend, given the science of the Fleetwood tidal wave, we know she went to only about, like, let's say, roughly in this area, okay? So then you start to go, okay, what is her 2-week dead sheep, not to be disrespectful, pendulum, okay? Because that's exactly what would have been happening back and forth, just understanding the science. Okay, she would have, endpoint, she would have been here, up and around, okay? And then I don't know how far she would have went. And I'll show you later with low tide. So, which is ironic to me as I was doing this. I wasn't even looking to pin Emma or anything. But here, look at this. Marsh Farm. Are you kidding me? Look at this. So I'll show up on the map here. If you look at the distance from where she was found to the bench, it's like 0.91 of a mile, okay? If you measure here to Emma's farm, it's like 0.87 of a mile. So almost dang near the same distance, okay? So, and my guess is they're going to put her out after the 15th presser because that's when the focus shift, either the 16th, 17th, 18th, right? They're going to be, if they're smart about it, right, which they weren't too smart, and I'll show you that, they're going to try to put her out at the beginning of low tide. Why? Because you put her out right here, low tide's going to start to bring her out. That's what you want, right? Low tide, okay? But as soon as it shifts and gets to high tide, it's going to pendulum her back, okay? Right? This is why I'm saying it's so significant. I don't know if that's how far she went. If she goes out here, she's going to go a considerable amount of way. But the thing is, this is the bookend. This is when the tide changes. So we know she's going this direction upstream for at least 6 hours, okay? So go back 6 hours, which we can't do exactly, but yeah, she flew through here pretty quick, it seems like. But look at this. It's going to halt her time in here, right? And then you have another one, right? You have another big S curve. Look at this. She's not going to flow through it like a race car. It's not going to happen, right? And as you'll see here, I'll show you, there's a tree branch here that has been broken and pushed over. What's odd about that is it has a yellow ribbon tied around it. Well, the ribbons weren't tied on the trees until after, a week and a half? So you know that tree was standing upright at some point. I highly doubt someone climbed into the water and tied the ribbon on a tree hanging in the water. It doesn't make sense. There's a gate right here too, so it makes you question, did someone back into the gate, knock the tree over, and toss her in? Could make sense. But either way, when I show the picture, you'll see she can easily go under it. Okay, and I'm not trying to make stuff up. Look at it for yourself. Then also there's tree brush here. But unlike where she was found, it kind of had like some cave to where you could see how she could go under it and get stuck. The brush that's right here, you can see how it would like stop her, but there's nothing she can go under, right? And she's not gonna ramp up onto it and rest. She's gonna hit it, it'll stop her, but as that tide continues to push up, it's eventually gonna push her and to wrap around, and she's gonna keep flowing, right? But the thing is how far does the 6 hours go back? I don't know, right? We're unable to know that. But it's gonna be a considerable distance considering how fast she went this, right? But like I said, this big S curve is going to take a lot of time because of the bends and the curves and the branch and stuff here. So, I think the pendulum is going to bring out this way, right? To a certain degree. And then she's going to go back and forth until she's found. Because that's the high-low tide, just like the dead sheep. Up here, back. And she's just going to continue that same motion. That's exactly what's going to happen. Like he said, the sheep. It's exactly what's going to happen, right? Well, here's the ironic thing. Yes, there's other properties, one across the street and whatnot. But look at this. Marsh Farm is right here. This is where Curtis Media is filming, down this water. Oh, and by the way, it's where his sister, as soon as he walks up here, pulls in and starts ripping his head off. I wonder why, okay? And you can see this. Yes, it's considerably low, right? No body's going to float down there. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this is all private land, okay? You go here midnight, 2, 3 in the morning, nobody's going to see you. And I'll show you a picture of this exiting here. It floods right out and open into this thing. And like I said, if they're smart about it, they're going to go out about 1, 2 in the morning on low tide, so hopefully she sucks out, okay? But again, depending on when they do it in the morning time, she's only going to go so far. Look at this, because it's going to take her a while to bend these curves, okay? There's just too many of them. Right? So once high tide comes back in, it's going to flush her in past up in there. The thing is, it doesn't prove this is exactly where she came, but it proves she passed here. It proves she passed here. Okay? Now, could someone have thrown her in there? I'm not saying that's not impossible. And I'm not saying, this is guaranteed coughing the nail. How ironic is it that Marsh Farm's right here, right? Curtis Media gets jumped standing right here. And the crazy thing is I'll show you an ad here. I believe Paul and Emma did go here, and got rid of her. Either the 18th, 17th, one of those 2 days. And it was just a matter of time before she was found, right? Maybe they hoped she would make her way out, but they weren't very smart about that because if you look forward, there was a new moon the next day, the 20th. And why does that matter? Because when it's a new moon or a full moon, which happens once a month, it increases the tides considerably, right? Which would increase the pressure and the flow. Had they waited one more night, put her out perfectly right at the end of high tide, low tide, it would have had the best chance to take her out. But they didn't take her. They didn't do that, okay? Which is nice because they found her on the 19th. You can't say the tides fluctuated that much. I'll show you again. They don't, which shows that just like the bloated dead sheep, she would have been on a pendulum for 2 weeks straight. And we know, given that she was found at 11:35, or that's when the police were called, and Jason says just minutes before, this book ends just by the science, the end of high tide. Which means, you don't know, she could have started here and went for... No, I know because the science shows that day it was measured at the Fleetwood tidal spot. The end of high tide was cusping around 11:21, 11:45. And by the time that comes down, we know that's the end of high tide. She would have then sucked back out, which would have been like the sheep coming back to the same place every time, which would be in roughly this area. Now, the ironic part is there's a stream here on the private property of Marsh Farm. Are you kidding me? Now, some people are going to say, oh, how do you know, they couldn't identify her. She was in the water for 3 weeks. Okay, guys, I understand that, okay? But I don't know if it was her own self-fate and they're covering it up for life insurance purposes, or if it was homicide. Okay, I don't know. But if they have the river idea in hand the entire time, they're not. I mean, they're going to do everything they can to replicate that, right? Now, I don't think they're going to keep her up by the road just sitting there for anybody to see her. Absolutely not. Who knows how she was concealed, right? But what I'm saying is that under the shade of darkness, okay, you're on Marsh Farm. There's nothing going to see you here and putting her in, right? Nothing. Like I said, the gate's here, but it's a highly traveled road. That's so dangerous. And anybody parked in there while Nick was missing would have been tipped off, okay? But like I said, why do I think it was within the last few days before she was found? Because when the cops got there, she was caught here in the trees. That's why I think it was the day before. And I'll show you on the maps. I think it was, what time was that? 6:23 a.m. was the beginning of high tide. So wherever she was at 6:23 a.m., wherever she was at, I think if they were smart, they would have come out here after midnight to hit her at low tide to hope that she goes out, okay? However far she goes. But then once 6:23 a.m. hits on the 19th, high tide rushes in, she starts to go back, okay? Maybe she gets strung up on this brush here and goes under that tree branch, gets stuck for a little bit. But she keeps moving, and it takes her a little bit of time to get around here. But as Jason said, he sees her flowing down the middle, and then she gets stuck in the brush there. Now, to say that it wasn't, you don't know it was the day before, well, then you're saying that she continued to float this whole time, and each time she went by here, she somehow miraculously missed it, okay? Then when low tide kicked in, she somehow came back and missed it again. Each day that you go back, she would have had gotten lucky both on that way and back missing that. Why do I say that? Because this has shown to be something that is strong enough to hook her and keep her there. These other things, I think they could stop her for a considerable amount of time. But as more water rushes and time goes, she's eventually going to be able to wrap around and be pushed around it. Yeah, they may stop her for 45 minutes, 2 hours, but eventually she's going to wrap her way around them or work her way around them. Neither of these can she go underneath and get stuck. Here, as we know, with where she was actually found, here, she very easily could go underneath and get stuck. I mean, she doesn't have a reverse button to where she can back out. If she has something to where she can go underneath and get stuck, then she's not going to get out, right? These two right here, I think, could stop her, as you can see, but flow eventually is going to push her around, just like as she goes around here. So 11:35 is important because it's the bookend of high tide. Even if she goes here, she's eventually going to make her way back, right? Okay? And then she's going to continue that same motion for 2 weeks, like the dead sheep. And she's going. That's how it works. It's not my opinion. That's science. And the ironic part is Marsh Farm is right here. They have this river part that goes perfectly out into here. I'm not saying they kept her in here. They would never keep her up here by the road. But why not right here? Okay? I know Peter Faulding says that he searched 2 to 3 miles up the river past the Wyre. So we know this is 0.91, and then to Emma's it's 0.87. So that's roughly 2 miles, okay? Another mile would be right here. But my question is did they stop him before he got here? Because he has that cadaver dog. I wonder if Peter was allowed to search here. If he wasn't, that's a huge red flag on the police's behalf. Major red flag. If somebody can give me an exact point as to where Peter Faulding had to stop his search, I would like to know. Because if he was ordered to not go up to here, that's a big problem, okay? And even if he did go past here in cadaver dogs, then maybe Nikki wasn't being concealed here. But if you think about it, this is their private land. You know, there's a huge tree here where you can see her. You could easily stash her here for a considerable amount of time. Face down, put an old boat over top of her. That water is going to decay her just as much as her being in the water. Nobody's going to be able to get on there. Look how vicious the sister got when he started filming here. They're protective of it, right? So the 11:35 and him seeing her come down the middle is huge because it proves that the narrative of making Faulding look bad, she was up in the reeds. No, she wasn't. He saw her floating down the middle, okay? Yeah, the water went up a meter on the 18th, I believe it was. 17th or 18th, and that's it. Otherwise, it always stayed stagnant. I even show the water levels here, okay? So maybe she got caught up a little bit, but she would have stayed there because that's the only time the water rose. How I know she didn't go up in the reeds, because had she went up into the reeds, it would have been the water rising a meter up at that time, and she would have stayed there. The fact that he saw her floating down the middle of the river here that day on the 19th morning a.m. shows that she didn't get stuck into the reeds when that water went up a meter. That's what that proves. You know, this is the bookend of the high tide. So this is the end of her 6-hour high tide journey, roughly. Okay, had she missed that, she maybe went to here. But then here's the point. Where's she coming from minus 6 hours, right? And the real crazy part is, look what's dead smack in the goddamn middle. I'll tell you what, if I was an investigator over there in St. Michael's, you better believe you, Emma White, I'd be knocking on your dang door, be putting on my suit, and I'll take the trial to court myself. I have enough circumstantial evidence. The ring on the finger, this whole crap is staged. I have all the science to back that up. I'm going to get to Becky here in a second. This in the science, I would love Peter Faulding to take a look at this assessment, because this shows where she's found right here, bookend of the high tide. What's the other bookend of the other 6 hours? Here? But then guess what that means? She's going to continue in this pendulum nonstop. Guess what's right in the middle? And then she's found 4 days after they switched the church. Come on now, people. All right, everyone. That was still a bit long. But I've had so many requests to kind of make a smaller episode, focus down on that farm. If you noticed, I took some of that from my last episode. Last note, too. I have received more emails in the last week and a half than I have my entire life. Like, no joke. Literally hundreds. So if you're one of those out there who hasn't gotten a response yet, please do not take it personal. I'm going to focus on the next couple days really trying to mow through those. And it's impossible for me to be able to get back to everybody, but I'll try my best to get back to as many as possible. I appreciate all the feedback and support. There's some good stuff out there. Just know that I am trying to read through everything, and I hear everybody loud and clear. So I appreciate the support. Until next time, everybody, mind juice out.